Hello and welcome to New York City Atheists, live on tape, brought to you by New York City Atheists Incorporated. I'm your host, Dennis Horvitz, the David Letterman of the Hopelessly Damned. The topic of this week's show is Hobbits, a new human species. Actually, it's posed as a question. Why does a surprise skeletal discovery add exciting new information to our knowledge of human evolution, and why are some religionists upset about it? Let me just read from our press release, skillfully put together by Jane Everard. Nicknamed Hobbits, these little people were discovered on the island of Flores in Indonesia, and they're little people who averaged a little over 3 feet tall, and they disappeared about 17,000 years ago. I think that was right around my high school graduation. Maybe they were in the class just behind me. Okay. But they left behind nearly intact skeletons and artifacts. Evolutionary scientists believe the hobbits to be a newly discovered species called the hominid Homo floresiensis, and it's an up to now unknown branch of the human evolutionary tree. And to explain this will be Dr. William L. Junger, is that how you pronounce it correctly? Who is the chairman of the Anatomical Sciences Department in the Medical School of Stony Brook University, as well as a distinguished teaching professor. His expertise is in, for which he is internationally known, is in functional anatomy. Now, this, as he will go on to say, this discovery is extremely controversial. And Desmond Morris, the author of the book The Naked Ape, has remarked that these hobbits are going to be the death of religion, causing creationists to be up in arms. Of course, I don't know if I would agree that it's the death of religion. That has been predicted before, but it certainly doesn't add to their argument, let me put it that way. So before I manage to mess up this information any longer, please welcome Dr. Junger.
So that's the forum where I would talk about this stuff. The medical curriculum is a little jam-packed. We try to sneak in a little bit of evolution, but the students, by and large, are not interested. In fact, I'm shocked by the number of medical students who do not believe in evolution. And that's because they've never been confronted with organismal biology any time in their career. The current teaching is you go from cellular to molecular to, they've never dissected a cat or a pig or a frog. Because if you did that, the structural similarity would force you to observe. So there are faculty in the School of Medicine who are spokespeople for science creation science. I mean, it's scary stuff. I don't know what it is. I think it's sort of I think it's largely online. There's been a proliferation of electronic journals, scientific and less so. So you can put together a website and have a journal and have subscribers and have volume numbers and page numbers in year. It's pretty easy to do now, but it's lacking one thing. It's called peer review. Right. And that's what it boils down to. You can. So this is it's what you need to have a very skeptical mind when you Google anything.
Dr. Junger, what do they consider to be the evolutionary advantage of these large feet?
The feet are not large. It's the hind limb that's short. So it's only if I were to just normalize that foot by upper limb or pelvic, it's like you and me. The reason it looks so weird is these hobbits have an Australopithecine-like body proportions. They have incredibly short hind limbs, and that's why the foot looks so big. It's a relative length. It's a relative. So it's not like they're wearing clown shoes or flippers. They have normal-sized feet for a hominid of that size. It's just their hind limbs are so short that it looks silly by comparison. Yes, sir.
How do you know that the tools that were found actually belong to the hobbits?
Because we have about 80,000 years of sediments with fossils intermittent with nothing but hobbits and tools like that throughout the sequence. And then at about 12,000, we get a volcanic event that seals the cave. A really thick ash layer. Above the ash layer, no more hobbits, no more pygmy stegodon, and modern people are there with Neolithic assemblages, pottery, grave goods, etc. Did hobbits ever interact with modern people? We don't know, but I can only imagine what the outcome would have been. Yes.
Yeah, with the out of Africa hypothesis, there are reasonably small people in Dmanisi in the Caucasus.
That's absolutely true.
And they're early, and they're not quite yet classifiable as to whether they're Homo habilis or could they possibly, people from there, track
been suggested. There's a site in Georgia, formerly part of the USSR, that I think they were excavating the grounds of it. It was an old monastery, and they started finding these odd bones. Now they got skulls and skeletons of things that look, for all intents and purposes, like they're from Africa, and they're most people put them in Homo erectus. Although they're small in body size, but they have the body proportions, the long hindlimbs that we characterize early Homo. But that just gets another example. Here was a whole group of hominids we didn't know existed until a decade ago. It's that arrogance that we, by looking at 5 places in Africa, we can tell the whole story of human evolution. There are going to be lots more surprises. The ancient DNA, gosh, wouldn't that be wonderful? We've only tried 4 times. But the problem is it's a wet cave, and it's the worst conceivable environment for preserving DNA. So we've gotten DNA from pigs at 7,000, higher up in the sequence, where we tried 4 different specimens, 2 different laboratories in Australia and Germany. Nothing. There's this notion, this unilinear model took hold in the 70s, and there were proponents of different graduate schools that sort of imbued their students with this line of reasoning. It's called the single species hypothesis. It was kind of a circular argument that humans occupy a special niche. It's called culture. We make things, we manufacture things, we have speech. We're special, and that gives us a competitive advantage. So if we would encounter any other things like us that lack this, we would outcompete them and they would be driven to extinction. So it's a self-fulfilling, sort of a tautological kind of argument. There could only be one thing like us around because we're going to exclude everything else. But we know that's wrong now. We know it. We have dates of Homo erectus going to 50,000 years ago in Southeast Asia, and now these are the hobbits. So these are the people, not surprisingly, who have latched on to the pathological arguments, because they must dismiss these fossils at all costs to their vested point of view. I know it sounds like the politics of paleoanthropology are real, guys.
Aren't there some primates that have kind of proto-culture?
Yes.
Sure.
Chimpanzees, are known from Liberia to crack open nuts with hammerstones. Yes. So, but to have what these guys were doing were going down to a riverbed, selecting certain kinds of rocks, whacking off a big core, taking that up to the cave, and knocking flakes off of it. I'm not aware of any chimps doing that.
Would that assume they had language, or can we speculate?
Language, boy, that's the holy grail of paleoanthropology. To my way of thinking, there's no anatomical way of determining whether language is there. This notion of symbolic behavior, usually people think, well, once you have art or grave goods, maybe it's likely or ornamentation, but we don't really know. We have a colleague in Stanford, Richard Klein, who argues there was some macromutation at 60,000 years ago and allowed us to have language. That sounds a little creationist to me. So, we don't know. That's a long and short question. Yes? Possible. I think the Dmanisi evidence that was referred to by another person is another good example of that. You don't find the needle without tearing the haystack apart. And that's what people are doing around the world. China is a place. I've heard rumors that there are some early human fossils that are currently being described from China much earlier than anybody anticipated. So I think Asia is the place I would look for sort of big surprises. What's happening in Africa, we just keep pushing the fossil record deeper and deeper. Last year I published a paper in Science with a colleague about something called a Lorum tugenensis. And this is a thigh bone that clearly is a bipedal thing. It had curved phalanges, which means it's probably climbing in the trees, but it has a hip bone just like you and me, and it probably walked on two legs. And that's 6 million years ago. So we keep pushing. In fact, what makes us human is not big brains and tool-making capabilities or language. It's walking on two legs. Everything else comes after that. Everything. That's how we diagnose the human ancestor, if they are bipedal or not. And we have nothing else to go after. Yeah.
The statement that we all originated from Africa is not true.
No, we originated out of Africa. Africa has been an engine for human evolution that's churned hominids out again and again and again. It's out of Africa 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Homo erectus is thought to be the earliest hominid to disperse out of Africa. But most people agree that modern humans get out of Africa. Now, the argument, 100,000, 150,000 years ago, and that's why we're all so similar, is that we can trace our ancestry back to a small group of individuals that got out of Africa yesterday.
But according to what I just learned, the Hobbits seems we have different species.
That's derived from a stock that is ancient, and it evolves in parallel to us, but it's not us. That's what I'm saying. There are many ways to be human. These things, some people call them human because they're in our genus Homo.
It's still mutation, right?
It's not mutation. It is mutations are the raw material. These are fossils that got out of Africa. We don't know when, but I suspect it could have been 2.5 million years ago. Homo erectus got out 2 million years ago. Modern people got out 100,000 years ago. And then, the diaspora continues.
It's a similar to Hobbits of their own sort. At some point, they had an African ancestor.
Yes. At some point, all hominins had an African ancestor. There's no, we don't evolve hominins from orangs in Asia and apes, chimpanzees in Africa. That's not how it works. There is what's called monophyly. All of these hominids share a common ancestor. Yes, sir. Yeah. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
I think you'd say that 6 specimens.
Right.
You mentioned 17,000 years.
Some of them go back to 95,000.
That's what I wanted to know. How old is the oldest one?
95,000.
How do you determine? And they definitely, so haven't changed significantly from the oldest to the most recent. They're definitely the same species.
There's no, the material at the bottom is a little more fragmentary, but what elements we compare directly to the stuff high, no difference. Same teeth, same limb bones. So this is a lineage that exhibits very little change over millennia. So we would call them, so we're all going to keep them in the same species, Homo floresiensis. The question was asked, how do we date them? Lots of different ways. There's carbon date, radiocarbon dating, there's something called thermoluminescence, uranium series. God bless geochronologists.
But I think most of these techniques have a very wide bandwidth, like plus or minus 10,000 years.
Not for
so I could see going back 400,000 years, plus or minus 10,000 is irrelevant.
Yeah, okay.
Like 17,000, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I just don't speak in confidence intervals. I should. I mean, you're absolutely right. When I say that there's a 70,000, that's plus or minus probably 800 years. And you get further deeper in time at 95,000, that's probably plus or minus 1,500 years. So you're absolutely right. It's just it's a shorthand to say our best estimate is 17,000 for that best specimen. But you're certainly correct.
I just wondered about their big feet. Could it be because it was very muddy and they were like snowshoes?
The feet are not big.
They're big in proportion.
They're big in proportion. What I would say is that those feet are great for walking. But you know what changes the human foot? We shorten our toes because if you walk, every time you walk, you toe off. You put all your body weight through your toes. That's bad if you have long toes. And so one of the features of human evolution is we can see it. Toes get shorter. Another feature of human evolution is we have this wonderful elastic coil mechanism. The arches. They're a soft tissue that keep most people maintain an arch. And when do you need an arch? When you're running. That's when you flatten the arch and you get elastic recoil. So we think that the reorganization of the modern foot is not related to walking, which hobbits did fine, but to endurance running, leap speed of running, certainly endurance. So it's a later, we think that's a much later development in human evolution. Why did they go extinct? There are two possibilities, at least two. They could have gone extinct because there was a local catastrophe. We know there's a huge volcanic eruption that seals the cave for a while. They could have persisted in other parts of the island for longer periods. I think the coup de grace was when people arrived. You can only imagine what modern people would have thought of these individuals. Given I mean, we're talking about a very, very impoverished fauna. I don't think modern humans would have started hunting giant Komodo dragons right away. The small elephants are extinct. There's some rats. What's left? Hobbits.
They probably try to make it Christians.
I don't know. I don't think the Neolithic people were. I don't think the Neolithics were anticipating that. Yes. These guys climb. Can you see? We are unusual. We've lost our locomotor repertoire. Most primates have a repertoire. They do more than just one thing. Now, children maybe have a repertoire. They climb, they fall, things like that. But early hominins, Australopithecus, for example, show features that clearly made them more adept in the trees than you and me. The hobbits show some of these characteristics. Their upper limb is incredibly well developed compared to their hind limb in a way that reminds us of chimpanzees and Australopithecus. So they may have made, and I'll tell you what, if there were giant Komodo dragons on the ground, I think the trees would look pretty good.
Do we have any evidence that they were either hunters or scavengers or?
Our best evidence comes from cut marks. If you go look in those deposits, you got some hominins, some hobbits. You've got lots of tools, some evidence of fire. Now that's, were they managing fire? Did they create fire? I have no idea. But the primary other element in there are juvenile and baby pygmy elephants, stegodon. And they're broken apart and they got cut marks on them. So using those stone tools to scrape flesh. Now, are they hunting them? I don't know. But they're dragging them into the cave to butcher them. They're also, how a hobbit does this. They were dragging giant Komodo dragons back to the cave and cutting them up. So that suggests some kind of cooperative effort to me. But that's about all we know. I'm sure they had plant resources, but they're in the highlands. It's very limited diet. Yes?
In what geological time frame do we have it when land masses were together and that people could cross? There seems to be some geological,
That's right.
And I'm trying to figure, maybe they walked across.
The last glaciation,
Yeah.
say 35, 45,000 years ago, the seas were at their lowest. There was more land exposed. Even at those lowest sea levels, floors was never connected to anything.
At the present time, we have no evidence of this.
No, they have done deep sea cores forever. I mean, they have a very good understanding.
Would not have been a land mass
Never.
together.
There's no emergent islands, no volcanic islands that subsided, and all the evidence suggests that under when the water was tied up maximally in glaciers, there were still no land bridges. So that requires two crossings of water, and that dispersal event is a mystery. But that's why very few things made it. How hobbits got there is a good question. It's a small island, about 250, 260 miles long. I'm not sure, I think it's about, maybe 70, 80 miles across at its max. That's a relatively small island, so that's been said to not be able to sustain huge populations. But you can do theoretical calculations, but we really don't know what the population density was like. It's been suggested to be low just based on what we see in other mammals and islands. It's just an extrapolation. No evidence of any projectile. I mean, there are lots of flakes that if you sort of stare at them really hard, you can imagine them being hafted, but there's no evidence of that at all. So what they had were rocks, clubs, You know, there's a whole industry that people have argued about in Southeast Asia. Now, Southeast Asia has a funny toolkit. There are no hand axes. The hallmark of Homo erectus is said to be these beautiful hand axes. You don't see that in Southeast Asia. Some people suggest that, well, maybe they're using bamboo as an alternative. Very untestable because it doesn't preserve. So they have bamboo spears? Who knows? Wonderful oral traditions on florids in other parts of Southeast Asia of tiny people. And, you know, when you hear these oral traditions, you're like, maybe it's some remnant, ancient recollection of modern people seeing these things. But then you got to realize this is a common mythology around the world. I worked in Madagascar as well. They have the legend of the Vazimba, tiny little people who live underground with an ancestor. We've all heard of leprechauns. I mean, this is a phenomenon that is really part of the mythological fabric that we see people around the world having. So I don't want to just say they're crazy because I can't dismiss it out of hand, but so I would point to the fact that, you know, it's pretty. These kinds of mythologies exist. These oral traditions exist in places where we're pretty sure there were no tiny hobbits. To say that they had language is different than saying that they had a vocal repertoire, that they had signals, maybe non-verbal communication. You know, cooperative behavior is not unique to people. So cooperative behavior does not require language in order to be put in operation. So,
when they hunt an animal,
chimpanzees, you know, in a hunt, you know, when chimpanzees are going for red colobus kill, they, you know, one goes this way, one goes that way. I don't think they're talking about it.
I'd like to segue.
Sure, of course.
I think your comments and observations of that recent television program, 47 doing the
Darwinius, yes.
They came up with what's your over for that? Describe it.
I don't. If you had probably to be unconscious not to see this, because Darwinius was this fossil that was blitzed through every media outlet you can imagine. There was a website that came on. There was a History Channel documentary came out on it. A book was released, and there was more press than I've ever seen. This is a 47 million year old fossil from Germany that looks like roadkill, but it is incredibly well preserved. You can see the outlines of the fur on the tail. So almost the entire skeleton is preserved. It's just crushed. Now, it's extraordinary. It's an immature specimen, so we can tell something about its development. It's part of a group of animals that we know very well from that part of the world and elsewhere. They're called adapids. It's a kind of fossil that most people are related to lemurs and galligans of Africa and Madagascar. However, the spin that was put on this thing was that this was the missing link. And somehow this revealed new things about human ancestry. These guys put the hype in hyperbole. I've never seen an orchestrated media blitz like this. And one of the people involved admitted that he had a hard time getting funding to do his work on dinosaurs and plesiosaurs in Norway. So this was a way to get a foothold and to generate donations. It's sad because, again, the term of the missing link is not a term that scientists use. And to have a program called the missing link, have a website called The Link, is misleading. It's the kind of stuff that creation scientists seize upon as hypocritical, and it's just dead wrong. There is no missing link. There are transitional forms, you know, there are transitional features, but there's nothing that's like, you know, this somehow unites two groups together. That's not an evolutionary biology perspective. That is a media perspective. So I feel bad because I actually gave data to one of the authors of the paper to help analyze it. It's a beautiful specimen. The scientific paper is really pretty darn good. I disagree with some of the conclusions, but it's what they did with that. You know, to get Richard Attenborough talking about, oh, the long hind limbs. You know, this is bipedal. It's not. It's a leaping lemur. You know, that's what it is. And so it doesn't tell us anything new about human evolution. It tells us something new about media wagging the body of science. And that's what disturbs me.
I don't know if you mentioned that. I know you say you've been to Madagascar. Have you ever gone to
Yeah,
Canada?
I was at the part of the excavations last year.
Because I didn't see a picture of this one.
Huh? Well, I'll make sure I'll have my picture taken there next.
You go to Flores to excavate? You oversee the excavation?
I'll be honest. I'm going to be honest with you. The excavation, most of the careful excavation done by the Indonesians and the archaeologists have been working on that island in other capacities for decades as teams. My expertise is analyzing what comes out of the ground, and so it's wonderful for me to be there. But I think my services are better used collecting data in museums and trying to make sense of it. But it sure was fun to watch them dig these holes deep into the ground.
Well, it was fun to have you as a
my pleasure.
More of our best presentations in a long time.
Thanks, guys. I had a good time.
Not that we don't attract the best and the brightest, but you've been watching New York City Atheists live on tape, brought to you by New York City Atheists. I have been your host, Dennis Horvitz. Thanks for watching, and please join us again next week. Bye-bye.